Hello, this is Deborah Klee, author of The Borrowed Boy and Just Be, and presenter of Castaway Books. Each week I invite one of my favourite authors to tell me about the books which have inspired their life and influenced their writing. This week's guest is Kim Nash. I'm delighted to welcome Kim Nash and to talk to her today because I first actually met or came across Kim for the Kim the Bookworm on a Tuesday evening on Facebook, where Kim interviews authors, and loved the programme. And as a result of that, got introduced to lots of writers, a couple of whom have already been on this show, and others who I see will be, when I've read their books, I'm sure they'll be invited too. So it's really good to be able to meet Kim. Because I had seen Kim on Facebook, I then started to read her novels and absolutely loved them, really absolutely transported by them. She writes extremely well. So Kim has been very busy because she's written 4 books in actually a relatively short time. The first was Escape to Gidwell Grange, the second Amazing Grace, and then Sunshine and Second Chances. And your 4th book, Moonlight Over Muddleford Cove, is due to be published on the 30th of March.
It is indeed.
Good. But because you've got a background as a book blogger, I should think it was particularly hard for you to choose your 5 books because you probably read much more than lots of people have.
Oh, do you know, I really did find it hard, and I really did have to test myself to find 5 books. So it was good. It was good to kind of, to go back and revisit things, to be honest.
Yes, and there are, I think, especially in our formative years, there are certain books that have had impact on your life. Perhaps in the latter stages of our life, less so. We have our favourite books. I think as you look at your growing up years, I'm finding with other authors as well, you have those that have a real impact. And I know from your list, you've got a couple of those in particular.
Yeah, I have. But to be honest, I think probably the 2 that had the most impact for me are probably the last 2 that I've picked, or the more recent ones. Which obviously we'll talk about.
You will. So shall we start at your first book?
Certainly. My first book that I chose was an Enid Blyton book, and it was The Naughtiest Girl in School. I just loved, I think it was probably my first introduction into proper books. So I probably would have been, I don't know, 7, 8 maybe. And I just loved them. I loved my family. I had a wonderful family. Mum and Dad were amazing. I had a lovely sister, although she was quite cruel to me when I was little. She used to slap me and leave slap marks on my arm. I know I shouldn't probably tell people that, but she
was
did.
Older, presumably.
She was 4 years older, yeah, and I was the annoying little sister. But I loved things like Mallory Towers. I loved the whole thing about going to boarding school. I suppose it's, be careful what you wish for. I never went to boarding school, luckily. But I suppose it was so far away from my life. And I think the thing that I loved about it the most was they always talked about when they used to go back to boarding school after a holiday, or their parents would send them a big trunk full of...
I imagine those hampers. I could imagine those hampers full of chocolate and, me too.
Yes, and that's all I could think about. And I used to play hockey and netball at school, and they used to play lacrosse, which was quite exotic for me.
I did lacrosse.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
You had to hold it just like this, and you had to rock the basket to hold the ball in it. And I loved that.
You must have been very posh, you see, because we never had lacrosse at our school. It was all netball and hockey.
I was useless at netball. I probably didn't. I can't remember playing hockey. We'd had lacrosse instead, but I was no team sports. Nobody wanted me in the team. But I just loved running with the basket across the field.
I was good at rounders actually at school. I was the one that it was the only time I ever got picked for the team first because I could really belt the ball.
Well, you would have hated me because I was one of those girls who would sit right on the outskirts, making daisy chains, hoping that the ball wouldn't come to me.
Love it. Absolutely.
Which is crazy because now I'm really super into, fitness. I don't sound super fit, but for years, all my adult life, I've been into fitness. But at school, I always bunked off games, hated it. It's funny, isn't it?
You're made to do it at school, though, aren't you? So,
and also, I don't like team sports. I like more solitary, competing against myself.
Yeah. But no, I think that was the book that kind of really introduced me into Enid Blyton, and then I just went on to devour everything that she ever wrote. So I loved The Faraway Tree, The Magic Wishing Chair, the famous 5 books I just adored.
Me too.
And I loved everything that she wrote.
Growing up, Enid Blyton played such an important part in all of our childhoods, I think. I guess there must be books like that for young people now, but is there anything that children enjoy? It's such a big thing as Enid Blyton was.
Probably, well, I was going to say maybe Harry Potter.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It's the one that everybody remembers, isn't it? And I know a lot of children loved to read it, and, you know, it has kind of started them reading, although adults read them too.
Yes. And what about your son, Ollie? What was the book that made him want to read?
Oh, God, I don't think he doesn't actually love reading, to be honest. He likes reading autobiographies.
Oh.
So at the moment, he's got Tyson Fury's autobiography. I'm not sure he should be reading some of these things. He's a big Manchester City fan, so he likes to read, anything to do with them. Any football books he loves. And he's also just had Eddie Hearn's book sent to him, which was great because it came from Hachette and he got a signed copy, so he was quite excited about that because he's quite into a bit of boxing as well at the minute. So
he sounds an intelligent boy.
Well, obviously he gets it from his mother.
Of course he does. Okay. So we've gone to your second book.
My second book, I was trying to work out how old I would have been when I read it. And I thought originally it was when I was about 12, but I don't think I could possibly have read it when I was 12. Excuse me, because there's some real adult themes in it. And I think I might have been maybe 14 or 15, but it was The Ring by Danielle Steele. And I think it was probably the most sort of adult book that I read, probably the most emotional book that I read. I used to just cry all the time at Danielle Steele books, but I loved the fact that they made you cry.
And this one was set in Nazi Germany, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So I suppose, there was a lot of things that, I love reading historical novels because they teach you things as well. Or there might be things that you learned but you've forgotten along the way, so it kind of brings all that to the forefront. So yeah, it talks about all the atrocities that went on, and it was just a very, very emotional book. So I think that was sort of the second book for me that was I suppose maybe my sort of journey into adult reading. And then we talked earlier, we talked about Shirley Conran books and Jackie Collins books that we kind of read, and the thought that my mum let me read those was probably quite weird.
I know, I feel the same thing. The Carpetbaggers, Lace, all of those books, my mother used to share them with me, and I could have only been about 14, 15 too. And I don't think I would be letting my daughter read things like that. But I kind of wonder whether that was also our kind of education into adulthood.
Yeah, it probably was, to be honest. But the Danielle Steele books were the books that really probably made me really want to be a writer. The famous 5 books did, but the Danielle Steele books were, because of the way that they made me feel, I wanted to make other people feel like that.
That's interesting. That's very mature at that age to see the power of the book in empathy and reaching people very early on in your life as well, to have realised that ambition.
But I also thought that to be an author, you had to have a big house by the sea, and you had an upstairs office, and your desk sat overlooking the sea, and that's when inspiration used to strike. So I'm still waiting for that. I might be waiting a while.
Yes, the life of a writer that you imagine as a young person is so unlike reality, isn't it?
Definitely, yes. I still have to go and pick up the dog muck in the garden. I don't have a servant come and do it for me.
Shame. So you were in your early teens. What were you doing then? Did you enjoy school? You obviously like sports. Were you studious? Did you go on to college, or what age did you leave school?
No, I didn't go on to college. I went and did a YTS scheme when they were around, and I went to a secretarial college because my mum was a secretary. And we were quite a sort of a working class family. My dad had his own shop. Mum was a secretary in a company. And Mum always said to me that if you can learn to type, you will always get a job working in an office somewhere. And I do think learning to type was probably one of the best things that I ever learned, because I think that makes me a quick writer. As long as my brain and my fingers can engage at the same speed, I'm okay. But I am quite quick at typing, and I do have this skill of being able to type on the keyboard while looking elsewhere and kind of going like this. And people that I used to work with used to find that fascinating.
It's amazing. I remember when I was at school, I suppose a huge percentage of the girls went on to Pitman's Secretarial College, because I went to school in Romford, and there was one up there by the station, if I remember. Loads of them did. But I did, although I didn't do that, I really regret not just not learning to touch type, but shorthand as well. I used to sit, because I used to, in my paid job, I had to interview people and take notes, and I'd scribble away. And then I was with one of the editors at The Guardian in a meeting, and I just saw him just shorthand everything. And I was thinking, if only I'd learned shorthand.
Well, my mom learned Greg's shorthand, which was a really old-fashioned version. And then my sister and I both learned Pitman's. But I have to say, from the day I left school, I never used it. I could probably just about do now something like "Dear Sir, yours sincerely," because that was like a big squirrely one, and that's about it.
Yeah. Okay, so we go on to your third book.
Yeah, I've picked Along Came a Spider by James Patterson, which was the first book in the Alex Cross series. I think I'd gone through a lot of my life at that point where I'd read a lot of women's fiction. And I remember being on holiday with my then boyfriend, and I'd run out of women's fiction books, and he'd just finished this James Patterson book. And I kind of went, just let me read it, because I just need to read something. I can't go on holiday and not read. And I read it, and I just loved it, absolutely loved it. And when I came back, his mum was a big reader, and I talked to her, and she very kindly said, I'll have a look in the charity shops and see if he's written anything else. And I said, well, I think he's written a few. And she went, it's fine, I'm going to make it my little project. And I don't think she realised at the time quite how many he had written. But I have a bit of a thing about series books. So for me, you cannot read a book out of series sequence. So she would go and get me books, but she might come back with number 8. And then we might have number 15. And I used to go in the beginning of the book, and I used to write number 8 and number 15 in the beginning of it. And then I used to pile them all up until I'd got sort of like 2 at a time, so I could read like one and then the other straight afterwards. And James Patterson is the master of the last paragraph. And I used to sit and say, right, that's it. I'm going to finish this book, and then I'm going to read something nice, something women's fiction-y. But I would read that last paragraph and then go, oh my God, I've got to read the next one now. But luckily I had the big pile.
And he does that in his books at the end of each chapter too, doesn't he? He has that. You have to do a page turner. Really good at page turners.
He is, and he writes very, very short chapters. So, you know, some chapters might only be a page long, and you do continuously read through his whole book going, I'll just read another page, I'll just read another chapter. And I always remember, again, with the same boyfriend, I remember going to an airport once, and him saying to me, there's a new James Patterson book in the in W.H. Smith's. And I went, yeah, I know, but it's £15. And he went, you're not going to buy it? And I went, no, it's fine. And I think we were on a long haul flight, and I'd finished the book before, and he went and bought me the book. And when he came back, I was quite excited about the book, obviously, but I'd actually read it before we got off the plane. And that was the reason I didn't buy it myself, because I knew that would happen.
And do you still read sort of crime thrillers? Or
I do, yeah. I do really like crime thrillers. I like to break up the sort of women's fiction. I love women's fiction, is where my heart is. But yeah, I love a good thriller as well. I don't like them to be too scary. But I do like, you know, sort of a bit of tension, something to get your heart racing a little bit, but I don't like them too scary.
Have you considered writing in that genre?
I do sometimes think that I might do. I can come up with a good idea, or a good starting idea. Sorry, that's my dog shaking. A good kind of starting idea. But then I just don't think I could really do much further. I think I'd quite like to write a cosy crime. I think that might be because I think that'd be quite entertaining and fun to write. But I don't really think a thriller would be fun to write.
So what was going on in your life at that time? You said you were with your boyfriend. How
Yeah,
old would you have been?
I would probably have been sort of mid to later 30s. It was a time when my mum was, I can't remember exactly whether my mum was very ill or my mum had passed away, because that kind of all blurred around that time, to be honest. And I'd also just been made redundant from my job as well. So there was kind of quite a lot going on, to be honest.
Mm. Mm. Okay. And so that was before Ollie was born, was it?
Yeah, Ollie was born a year after my mum died, sadly, so she never got to meet him.
Really sad. I think it's hard losing a parent at any age, until you've lost a parent. I mean, I felt like this until I lost my mother. I hadn't realised just how hard it is. You know, even when a parent dies when they're really quite old, it doesn't make any difference, or even if you expect. And I think before I had lost a parent and somebody said a parent had died, I would give all my sincere condolences, but I had no idea how it affects you. Incredible.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my mum was 70. She'd fought cancer on and off for 10 years. She was amazing, the best mum I could have ever wished for. A huge reader, she loved reading, and I would have loved her to know that I ended up writing books. An Amazing Grace, which was my first book, has actually quite a lot of me in that book, because the character is a woman who lost a mum and was struggled through life. I really struggled through that first year of Ollie being born, because I just wanted my mum there. Who do you want more when your kids are born than you want your own mum there, don't you?
Absolutely. It makes it doubly painful, doesn't it, really?
It does. It really, really does, yeah.
I think I wonder whether you have a little bit, maybe all authors do have a little bit of themselves in a number of the characters, because I know when I was reading Sunshine and Second Chances, and there's one woman with a dog and one with a son, I'm thinking, how many of these different aspects of your personality or people well? Is that true?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And Sunshine and Second Chances, I suppose, it kind of originated from the fact that there were people around me that were going through certain things at the time. I had a friend whose mum had got dementia, and I kind of wrote that in, and I tried very hard to make it really, what's the word?
Authentic.
Authentic. Yeah, that's a perfect word. Thank you. Because I wanted to do it justice as well, and I wanted to do her mum justice because she was going through it. She was the person with dementia, and I wanted to do my friend justice as well. My sister at the time, her son had just gone off to university, and I know she was kind of experiencing empty nest syndrome, and there was just lots of things that were going on around that people that sort of age, they all go away on to celebrate their 50th birthday. And I think people who are that age have got things going on around them. They have got families that are demanding. They have got parents that are ill, maybe thinking about having to put them into homes, and you've got all that sort of stuff going on, as well as trying to run your own life, and you kind of lose yourself a lot, I think, along the way.
Absolutely. And I think that's why lots of people will really identify with that. My father had dementia, and I felt that you did write authentically. Another reason why I loved that book, because as you say, when you get to a certain age, women experience lots of the different things that your characters did in that story. I remember listening to a Radio 4 program once, which was about school reunions, and the point was made, when you go, certain stages, you're all there kind of competing, you're in your 30s, and you want to be one-upmanship, etc. And then you get to about 50, and the person speaking said almost everybody had gone through major life events that had been difficult, challenging, and had changed people, and they came together in a much more supportive way in their 50s when they got together.
And I shared something actually yesterday for International Women's Day, and it was something, a quote that I'd written in the book, and I just said, amazing things happen when you put strong women together as well, because they support each other, they inspire each other, they motivate each other, and they just encourage you, they lift you when you're down, and they just encourage you to be the best version of yourself that you can be. And I don't think you get that when you're younger. You might do, but I don't think you appreciate it really until you get to that sort of, that age where that you need a bit of help from your friends, and and know that you can still do things. And that was the good thing about Sunshine and Second Chances for me. I wanted people to know that, yes, you might be peed off that your family are taking you for granted, but, do something about it.
And you're following through that aspiration you had as a young girl, which is touching people, so that you bring out the empathy and the connection and reaching them in a very real way, which is what makes you such a good writer.
Well, thank you so much. That's nice to hear.
So shall we go on to your fourth book?
Yes, and this was a very, very life-changing book for me. It was A Spring Affair by Millie Johnson. It's a book about a lady who goes into a dentist surgery, and she reads she picks up a magazine and she reads an article about clutter clearing, and she goes home and starts to clear some of the clutter out of her life. But then she realizes that it's actually not the clutter in her life that she's unhappy with, it's all the other things that are going on in her life at the time. And it was just a book that really resonated with me. I was a mom, and my son was very young. I was a mom. I had a partner who had a very busy job, a very big job. So everything was kind of down to me. I'd got, at the time, my dad was ill, and we were trying to look after my dad. He didn't live far away, so we were kind of at dad's, visiting him in hospital when he was going into hospital and all sorts of things like that. And it just felt that life was exhausting and that everything I did in my life was for other people. And I'll never forget it, because I wrote to Millie Johnson. At the beginning of the book, it just said, if you've enjoyed this, do write to me. And I wrote thinking, she's an author, she's never going to write back to me. And within an hour, she wrote back to me. I'll never forget her words. And she said, you lady are the reason I write books. And I kept in touch with Millie. I'd said to her, I've just been and ordered every book that you've ever written. I think she'd only written 3 or 4 at the time. And she said, do let me know what you think of them when you've read them. And we kind of got chatting on email. And it was lovely to do that. And I was like, oh my God, she's an author. How exciting. She's an author and she's responding to me. And she asked me if I would like to become an advanced review reader, which I had no idea that these things existed. And I said I would love to. And then I worked at the time somewhere where we had a family travel blog. And I just thought, you know what, I might set up a book blog and just talk about the books that I've loved reading. And I just said to Millie, I've got this idea. What do you think? She said, there's not many book bloggers about. She said, why don't you go for it? I think it's a great idea. And I'll, put the word out amongst my fellow author friends. And if anybody wants to send you books and get you to review them, then, perhaps we could do that. And that for me was life-changing, because it gave me an introduction into the publishing world, which, when I was that little girl who wanted to be an author, I also wanted to I wanted to work for a publisher, because I thought that to work for a book publisher, you just got to read books all day long.
Don't you?
I know. People think I do. Lots of people think I do. And I wish I did. But sadly not. But it did kind of, put me into a world where I was mixing with authors, I was mixing with publishers, I was talking to people. And I was asked by a lovely man called Oliver Rhodes, who had set up a company called Bookouture. And he asked me if I would read a book by Sue Watson called Love, Lies and Lemon Cake. And I said I would love to. And at the end of the email, I don't know what made me do it, but I just said, I would really love to work in the publishing world. I've been in sales and marketing and PR all my life. I would just love to get involved more in the publishing world. And if you ever hear of any opportunities, if you would let me know, I'd be mega grateful. And he emailed me back and he said, well, funnily enough, I'm in a position where I can't afford to take somebody on, but I would love to work with somebody on a freelance basis on maybe one project at a time. Why don't we do that and see what happens? So he knew me as a book blogger, and we kind of, and that's where we started. Bookouture had been going for a year, and that's how I kind of got started working in publishing. And then I suppose on the flip side of that, because I was mixing with authors and watching people that kind of go, do you know what, I'd love to write a book, and they were actually doing it, I just thought to myself, I can sit here and I can keep saying I'd love to write a book, or I can sit my backside down on a chair and have a blooming good go and try and write a book, which is what I did. So I suppose all that kind of inspired me, but it all instigated by A Spring Affair by Millie Johnson.
Amazing. I absolutely love that story. And we're all so glad that you did decide to write, because we're all benefiting and enjoying your book. But, you know, I write about, in my blog, I write about the inward journey of the creative, and the message, you know, about personal development. And the message I try and get across to people is by being open, not hanging on to one particular outcome, but being open and relaxed, so that when opportunities do come into your life, you recognize them and you respond to them. And that's exactly what you did. You know, you saw the opportunity came and you did something with it. And from there you went on and you went on. And I admire you, not just as a writer, I admire you for the way you absolutely put over 100% into anything that you do. You know, look how quickly you got your books out and how you network, and you're constantly on Zoom doing interviews for Bookature or your own projects. So, yeah, well done to you. And it's wonderful that it was a book and that connection with Millie Johnson that sparked all that and led to such a big change in your life.
Thank you. I often sit and think to myself, you know, I'm way too busy. I take too much on. You know, if somebody says to me, would you do this? I go, yeah, I'd love to do. But at the same time, you know, I'm the sort of person that I always used to say, you know, I'll just go and stack shelves in Tesco's. It's going to be less hassle. But I'd be the one that goes in and I'd be like, right, I don't think that should go here. I think this should go here. And I think we need to reorganize the store so it does this. And I think I'm just that type of person.
I'm exactly the same. I started out in one point in my profession and I kept on moving up in it because I kept seeing how things could be done better, but I had to be on the next level to do it.
Yeah.
Can't help being bossy, however much you want a quiet life. So.
I think Ollie always used to say to me, Ollie that started Bookature always used to say to me, the thing that I like about you is if if there's no obvious way, so if there's a door and you can't get through the door, you'd go, right, well, can I get under the door? Can I get round the door? How do I get round that way? Can I get over the door? Can I get through the door? You know, and that's, yeah.
And that's exactly what you need to succeed as a writer, don't you think? The stamina, the can do, finding a different way and not giving up.
Yeah, I think so. It's that sort of determination and tenacity, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And I know you're constantly saying, recognising in the authors that you interview, you keep saying, don't give up, because each of their stories, they didn't give up. And so there's a message there for the writers out there, isn't there?
Definitely, yeah. That's one thing that comes from those Tuesday night chats. You know, so many people have said don't give up because you just don't know what's around the next corner.
No. And keeping an open heart and mind, and not being so narrow focused on what you think the outcome will be, but being open, I think, because there's lots of ways to skin a cat. As you say, there's lots of different ways of doing things. Don't just get so like this, you don't see the opportunities that come into your orbit.
Yeah, definitely.
Good. So we go on to your fifth and final book.
I have chosen a book that I've read very recently. It's a book called The Girl on the Back of the Bus by Suzette D. Harrison. It is a Bookature book, but it's a book that really, really challenged me. And when I say it challenged me, it challenged my beliefs. It challenged what I knew about the world, what I probably may have chosen to ignore in the world. So yeah, it taught me a lot. It's about it's a dual timeline, and it's about a Black woman in America who feels that she's been prejudiced against in her work. And then it goes back to 1955 in, I'm trying to think of where.
Was it Georgia?
Yes, it is. Yes, it was. It was Georgia, wasn't it? Sorry, just completely lost it then. And a young girl called Mattie Banks who went on the back of a bus one day, and she was on the bus that Rosa Parks refused to give her seat up to a white man. And it just taught me so much about history. It taught me about what people had to live through in those days. And it made me want to go on and learn more about it. I then went on to watch The Help. I've not read the book The Help, but the film was on, and I really wanted to watch the film, and again just learn more about those times and what people had to go through, which is just, you know, it's just heartbreaking. But the book was beautiful, beautifully written. So I think, you know, for it to be I do say it's an educational book. I think everybody should read it because I think everybody should know you know, what people really did have to live through in those times. But it's also a fabulous, fabulous book with emotion. It's heartbreaking. It's sort of, you know, uplifting at the same time. It's everything you could wish for in a book.
Books are so powerful about getting us to walk in someone else's shoes, to see the world through somebody else's perspective. And that was then, but I believe there are still issues today, and we can't know what people are experiencing. And it's not just around race. I mean, with disability, with all sorts of problems, challenges, and different sorts of lives. When somebody is able to write through a character, readers can experience what that might be like for them. And
Definitely.
I think it's so important to raise awareness.
And that's what that book did for me. And it's a book that, you know, I will never, ever forget.
It's not threatened. Just as the help was, it's well written in a way so that nothing's being pushed at you, like to giving a message. It's written in a beautiful way, really enjoyable.
Definitely. Fabulous book.
Yeah. Okay. So we're coming to the end. Thank you for those books. Oh, hang on. No, we're not. I haven't really asked you what was going on in your life. I got so into talking about the book.
Oh, sorry, yes. Well, it was quite recent, so you know, it's lockdown. Lockdown's not the greatest. We were homeschooling. That's had its moments. It like I say, it was earlier this year. I was doing my Facebook Lives, chatting to authors, and I did actually interview the author on a Bookshore Facebook Live, and she was so fascinating to talk to. She's such a lovely lady.
We'll have to go back and look for that one. Are they still there? Is it still?
Yes, definitely. I'll send you the link to it.
Lovely, thank you. I shall put that link up when I put up the notes from this with
Thank you.
So viewers and listeners on the podcast can follow that up as well. That's good. If people haven't discovered your Facebook Tuesday chats, then they really must have a look and see. It's 8 p.m. GMT, isn't it? And it's 3 p.m. EST.
I'm not very good with time, so I just kind of go, it's 8 o'clock UK time because that's where I am. And yeah.
They're great. I love visiting them. It feels like you're meeting up with a whole group of people, even though
I love doing them. And, you know, what's better than it's like this, you know, we're just sitting chatting about books. What's better than that?
I know, it's lovely. So now we do come to your luxury item. You're going to have all the books you asked for. And in fact, I've been generous and I've said to people they can have all the books written by those authors as well. So you've got lots of books and reading, and you've got loads of paper and pencils and writing materials. So what will be your luxury?
Well, I've gone for my Mac.
Your Mac on a desert island? Because?
Yeah, because I can write. I can't write. I'm not very good at writing.
Oh, I thought you meant a raincoat.
Oh, God, no. My Mac, my computer. So, yeah, because obviously I probably wouldn't get internet in the middle of there, but I could carry on writing, and I think that would be great for me. Because that's, you know, for me, writing is typing. And I think because I can type quicker than I can write. And I know people say that when you write, you use a different part of your brain. I like to do mind maps and character arcs and all sorts of things. And I like to do that in lots of different colours. But to get the story from my head into a book, it has to be on a keyboard. So I was going to say originally, I was going to say my Kindle. But then I kind of went, well, if I have my Mac, I can have a Kindle app on my Mac, and then I can read Kindle books as well at the same time. So I was a bit sneaky.
Because you're a typist, I should think that magic happens on your fingers. If you can look around, it's just a straight route through head, imagination through to finger in a way that us mere mortals who can't do touch typing can achieve.
It is the best thing I've ever learned in my life, I have to say.
My mind had gone on. When you said Mac and I thought a raincoat, I was thinking, oh, maybe it's so that she can sit on it, so like a Macintosh square, like in a room with a view. Or maybe it's because she thinks it'll rain, or was she going to sea with it? My mind was going off on all these uses.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, definitely not a flasher Mac, a different type of Mac.
Great. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Deborah.
I'm looking forward to reading your next book, which is Moonlight Over Muddleford Cove.
It is indeed, yeah. It comes out on the 30th of March. I'm really excited to get that out into the world.
We look forward to receiving it and reading it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this week's episode of Castaway Books. References for all of the books discussed in this show can be found on my website, which is www.abrahkdeborah.wordpress.com. It's the letter K and then my name, Deborah, Deborah. So until next week, goodbye.